The most arrogant young man I encountered entered my courtroom on a Tuesday morning and declared that I was powerless. His name was Derek Martinez, 21 years old, son of County Sheriff. By the time he left 15 minutes later, he fully understood what real authority entails. It began straightforward. Saturday night, around 11 p.m., Derek collided his pickup truck with Mrs. Henderson's mailbox, a quiet residential neighborhood where families sleep with windows open and children ride bicycles on sidewalks. He was traveling at 45 zone when he lost control and struck the brick mailbox, completely destroying it and nearly taking out a fire hydrant. When patrol officers arrived, Derek was stumbling around the wreckage, emitting a strong slurring his speech and unable to walk a straight line despite the circumstances. Blood alcohol testing revealed 0.12, well above the 0.08. This appeared to be a clear DUI case, right? It should have been a routine booking, court appearance, and standard penalties. However, nothing about the Martinez family was ever interesting. The arresting officer, Sergeant Williams, with 15 years of service, an unblemished record, and no history of corruption complaints, attempted to process Derek normally. Standard procedure involved handcuffs, Miranda rights, and transport to the county jail for booking. That's when Derek began making phone calls. Not to a lawyer, not to his mother, not even to a friend. Instead, he called his father directly, Sheriff Roberto Martinez. "Dad," Derek said into his phone while sitting in the back of the patrol car, "these officers arrested me. Handle this situation immediately." Within 20 minutes, Sheriff Martinez appeared at the scene. Not dressed in civilian clothing like a concerned father, but in full uniform, with his badge prominently displayed, acting as if he was there personally. "This is a family matter," Sheriff Martinez told Sergeant Williams, his voice carrying that authority that law enforcement officers use when they expect immediate compliance. "My son made a mistake tonight, had too much to drink, but we'll handle it privately. No need for charges, no need for paperwork. I'll ensure he gets home safely and deals with the consequences. No need for charges, for a DUI, for property damage, for reckless endangerment, because it's a family matter and the sheriff declared it." Sergeant Williams, an experienced officer with 15 years of service and unwavering principles, explained patiently that drunk driving isn't a family matter. It's a public safety concern. That Mrs. Henderson's destroyed mailbox isn't a private issue. That Derek's blood alcohol level of 0.12 isn't something you handle with a family conversation. "With respect, Sheriff," Williams said, "your son committed multiple violations tonight. I must process these charges according to department policy." That's when Sheriff Martinez dropped his professional demeanor and he stepped closer to Williams, using his height and position to intimidate. "Sergeant Williams," he said, his voice becoming more forceful, "you work for this county. I direct this county. My son walks out of here tonight without charges, or you'll be directing traffic at school crossings in the morning. Do you understand?" An open threat, using official position to obstruct justice, attempting to interfere with a legitimate arrest, all felonies incidentally, but Sheriff Martinez believed his badge made him immune. However, Sergeant Williams didn't back down. He didn't blink. Don't allow corruption to triumph just because it wears a uniform. He filed the charges anyway, followed proper procedure, documented everything, including the sheriff's attempted interference, because that's what good officers do when they witness the system attempting to protect itself instead of serving justice. The next morning, I was at my desk by 8:15, reviewing the previous night's arrests over Christina's strong Italian coffee. Derek Martinez's case file was right on top, and it was thicker than usual for a simple DUI. That's when I noticed Sergeant Williams' additional report about Sheriff Martinez's interference. I've known Roberto Martinez for years, a good officer mostly, served the community well, maintained low crime rates, ran a professional department, but success sometimes goes to people's heads, makes them believe rules apply to other people. Having power doesn't make you corrupt, but it certainly reveals whether you were corrupt all along. 9:30 a.m. Sharp, Derek courtroom like he was arriving at a country club. Designer jeans, expensive sneakers, leather jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it wasn't the clothing that troubled me. It was the attitude, the confidence, the smirk that says, "I know something you don't know." His father wasn't with him, probably realizing his presence might draw unwanted attention after the previous night's interference. A smart move, actually, but it wouldn't protect his son from facing consequences. "Derek Martinez," Christina called from her desk, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. "Driving under the influence, property damage, reckless driving, and resisting arrest." He walked up to my bench, and I could already sense the attitude emanating from him. Not worried like most DUI defendants, not respectful like people who understand they broke serious laws, not embarrassed like young people who made dangerous mistakes, just annoyed that he had to be there, like this was all some clerical error that would get resolved once people understood who he was. "Mr. Martinez," I began, looking at his criminal record and the incident reports, "you're charged with operating a vehicle while intoxicated with a blood alcohol level of 0.12, property damage, and reckless driving. Do you understand these charges?" "Yes, I understand them," he said, like he was bored talking to his high school principal, "but I think we need to clarify something here before this continues any further." Clarify something, the phrase that entitled people use when they believe their connections override the law. "What needs clarification, Mr. Martinez?" "Look, Judge," he said, leaning casually against the defendant's table like he was lounging at a bar. "I know about this situation. This entire thing is just a big misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." A misunderstanding. Drunk driving is a misunderstanding. Destroying someone's property is a misunderstanding. Endangering an entire neighborhood is a misunderstanding. "Mr. Martinez, your blood alcohol was 0.12, well over the legal limit. You crashed into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox doing 40 in a 25 zone. What part of that is a misunderstanding?" "The part where I get arrested and dragged through court like some common criminal," he replied, his voice becoming sharper and more aggressive. "Do you know who my father is, Judge? There it is. The magic phrase that entitled people think solves all their problems. Yes, Mr. Martinez, I know who your father is. Do you know who I am?" "You're a municipal judge," he said with a dismissive shrug. "Local level stuff, traffic tickets, small claims, minor violations. My dad runs the entire county sheriff's department. Different leagues, you know." Different leagues. Local level stuff. Like municipal court is somehow beneath county law enforcement, like judges are minor officials compared to sheriffs. This young man had no understanding of how government works, how checks and balances function, how separation of powers protects democracy. "Mr. Martinez," I said, keeping my voice level but firm, "in this courtroom, I decide what happens to people who break the law. That includes drunk drivers who happen to be related to law enforcement." That's when he laughed. Actually, laughed at me, like I just told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. He threw his head back, ensuring everyone in the courtroom could see his amusement at my ignorance. "Judge," he said through his laughter, "with all due respect, you're completely powerless here. You think you make decisions? You think you control outcomes? My dad controls all the cops, all the arrests, all the evidence. Without his cooperation, you can't do anything to anyone. You're just a person in a robe pretending to have authority. Powerless." This entitled young man just told a sitting judge he was powerless because his father wore a badge. Just declared that law enforcement families are immune from judicial authority, that sheriffs outrank judges, that corruption trumps justice as long as it comes with a uniform. The courtroom went completely silent. Everyone, other defendants waiting for their cases, court officers, bail bondsmen, even Christina, was staring at this young man who just declared that judges have no authority over sheriffs' families. You could feel the shock in the air, the collective intake of breath from people who understood they just witnessed something unprecedented. "Mr. Martinez," I said, standing up from my bench slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of the moment settle on everyone present, "did you just tell me I'm powerless?" "I'm just stating facts," he replied, with that same arrogant smirk, that supreme confidence of someone who's never faced real consequences. "You need evidence to convict people, right? My dad controls the evidence. You need police cooperation for enforcement. My dad controls the police. You need jail space for sentences. My dad runs the jail. So yes, when it comes to my family, you're pretty much powerless. That's just reality." He actually believed the justice system was some kind of game where his father held all the cards, that sheriffs are above judges, that law enforcement families are immune from consequences, that badges create a separate class of citizenship with special privileges and protections. Behind Derek, I could see other defendants watching this exchange with amazement. Working people mostly, folks who'd never imagined telling a judge he was powerless. People who understood that showing respect in a courtroom isn't optional, that challenging judicial authority is like challenging gravity. It might feel good for a moment, but the landing is going to hurt. Mr. Martinez, I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom, you seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding about how the justice system works. I understand perfectly, he said, crossing his arms like a petulant teenager. Power protects power. Money protects money. Badges protect badges. My dad has real power. Guns, badges, jail cells, the ability to make people's lives very difficult. You just have a robe and a wooden hammer. Just a robe and a gavel. This young man thought judicial authority was costume jewelry compared to his father's badge. He saw democracy as a hierarchy with law enforcement at the top and judges somewhere below, taking orders instead of giving them. Mr. Martinez, let me show you what real power looks like in a democracy. I sentenced him to the maximum penalty for first offense DUI, 6 months license suspension, $1,000 fine, 40 hours community service, mandatory alcohol education, and 60 days in county jail with work release. His smirk disappeared instantly. What? You can't do that. I just did. Bailiff, please take Mr. Martinez into custody. Wait, he shouted as Officer Rodriguez approached with handcuffs. My father won't allow this. Your father has no authority in my courtroom. He'll have you removed. He'll make sure you never work again. Mr. Martinez threatening a judge is contempt of court. That's an additional 30 days. As they cuffed him and read his Miranda rights, Derek kept shouting about his father, about how this wouldn't stand, about how I didn't understand who I was messing with. But here's the beautiful thing about justice. It doesn't care who your father is. 2 hours later, Sheriff Martinez called. Judge, I need to discuss my son's situation. Sheriff, your son was sentenced according to law. There's nothing to discuss. Judge, Derek is a good young man who made one bad decision. Surely we can work something out. Sheriff, the law doesn't make exceptions for law enforcement families. Judge, I've served this community for 25 years. I think that earns some consideration. Sheriff, your service is commended. It doesn't purchase immunity for your son. Long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. Judge, I control all law enforcement in this county. Without my cooperation, your courtroom becomes powerless. Now the sheriff was threatening me too. Sheriff, are you threatening this court? I'm explaining reality. Sheriff Martinez, if you interfere with your son's sentence, I'll hold you in contempt and have you arrested by state police. I hung up and called the state attorney general's office. Within an hour, 2 state investigators were taking my statement about attempted interference. The real test came that evening. Derek was supposed to report to county jail for his first night. The 8 p.m. deadline came and went. No Derek. I called the jail directly. Sheriff Martinez had been there all evening, actively preventing his son from serving his sentence. I called state police. This is Judge Caprio. I need a warrant executed for failure to report. Within 30 minutes, state troopers arrested Derek at a party, still drinking, celebrating his father's protection. They transported him to state holding, bypassing county jail entirely. The next morning, Derek was back in my courtroom in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. His arrogance was gone. Mr. Martinez, you failed to report for sentencing. That's a violation. Your Honor, there was confusion. Mr. Martinez, 8 p.m. is not confusing. Your father preventing you from serving is obstruction of justice. Your Honor, I want to apologize. Mr. Martinez, 8 p.m. is not confusing. Your father preventing you from serving is obstruction of justice. Your Honor, I want to apologize. Mr. Martinez, 8 p.m. is not confusing. Your father preventing you from serving is obstruction of justice. For failure to report, I'm adding 90 days to your sentence. For your father's interference, I'm referring this to the state attorney general for investigation. Derek's face went white. You're going to have my father arrested? Your father attempted to obstruct justice. That's a felony, regardless of what badge he wears. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Roberto Martinez was arrested by state investigators. Derek served his full sentence in state custody with no special treatment. 6 months after his release, Derek came back to speak at a program for young offenders. Your Honor, he said, I want to tell these young people what I learned about real power. I thought my dad's badge made me untouchable. I thought judges were powerless compared to law enforcement. I was completely wrong." He turned to the teenagers. "Real power isn't about who you know. Real power is accountability. This judge taught me that nobody Derek completed college, became a counselor. His father served 18 months in federal prison and lost his position as sheriff. The new sheriff, Captain Rodriguez, stopped by my chambers. Judge, the Martinez case changed everything in our department. When Derek told you that you were powerless, what did you think?" "I thought about every citizen who's been told connections matter more than law. I decided to prove them wrong. Real power isn't about badges or guns. Real power is ensuring justice applies equally to everyone." Derek Martinez learned that judicial power isn't costume jewelry. It's the foundation of democracy itself. His father learned that wearing a badge doesn't place you above the law. My father used to say, "Frank, power without accountability is just tyranny." The Martinez family learned that lesson the hard way. I'm Frank Caprio. Remember, in America, the law is the ultimate power, and nobody is above it. Thanks for listening, and God bless. And